that's when I consulted with you guys.
When you say you guys,
I mean, Brad, you and District Attorney Paul Bowden by telephone to facilitate a meeting between y'all on that Sunday morning before we talked about it.
with regard to the person referred to as Mr. Fox, is that the attorney here in the courtroom with Mr. Dukes today?
Yes, sir, it is.
Now, with regard to that interview that took place, I believe this was on a Sunday morning, is that right?
Yes, sir, it was Sunday morning at approximately 9:30 at our office.
Now, with regard to that, did you come in, what did you do to start that meeting?
If I recall, yourself and the DA's office people, I'll refer to it as that, is the ones I've talked about with, so it would be Kim, Paul, yourself, showed up before John and Bo. You sat down in the conference room. Shortly thereafter, John and Bo showed up and sat down in the conference room as well. And I said, I understand that y'all may want to have a conversation. I don't know what y'all are going to talk about. I don't want to be a part of that conversation. It's not relevant to what I want to talk about. And then I removed myself from that office and walked down the hall to my office and sat in there waited for you guys to come and get me.
Now, with regard to that, how long was it before you came back in to speak with Mr. Dukes and Mr. Dukes' attorney?
I have the meeting concluded at approximately 10 a.m., so about a half an hour's talk between the two parties, and then I came back in.
Okay. Now, following, when you came back into the room on that February 19th, did you speak with Mr. Dukes and Mr. Fox at that time?
Correct, briefly.
All right. And after that conversation that you had with Mr. Dukes and Mr. Fox, what did you arrange to do then?
During the meeting or after the meeting?
During the meeting.
Okay. I briefly asked Bo because at the time we didn't know, we had information from Brooke about, another person involved in Miss Grinstead's death. We didn't know exactly who that person was at the time, so one of the questions I asked Bo is, please give me the name of the person who is the alleged, killer of Miss Grinstead, and he gave me the name of Ryan Duke. And he said, I showed him a photograph of the orchard. I'd already gone and taken some aerial photographs based on Brooke's interview, and so I had some screenshot photographs printed off of the orchard. He pointed out and acknowledged that that was the same location, that we were in the right area of where this had happened with the disposing of the body. And he said that they had, burned the remains. And at that point in time, we knew that we wanted to go back out there with him, but we didn't have, at the time, it was a weekend. There was a lot of things going on at our office already, so as far as the number of agents that we wanted to have, after consulting with my supervisors, we wanted to have more resources in place to be able to follow up with the things he was saying. So we set up a formal interview with him on Tuesday, which would have been the 21st, at our office at 10 a.m. that morning.
Okay, let's continue then talking about the February 19th discussion that you had with him and his attorney, Mr. Fox. Did you make any promises or threats to him to get him to talk to you that day?
I did not.
Was he under arrest that day?
No, sir, he was not.
After you talked with him at the GBI office on February 19th of 2017, did you arrest him after you talked to him?
No, not, when you say after, when? You'd have to be more specific.
On Sunday, February 19th of 2017, when you finished talking with defendant Bo Dukes and his attorney, did he leave your office that day, or where did he go?
He left that office that day. Where he went, I'm not sure.
All right. Now, with regard to that, did you advise him of his Miranda rights that day?
No.
Okay, and why did you not do that?
He wasn't in custody.
All right. Now, you said that you arranged a meeting with him, a second meeting with him, that being on February the 21st. Let me ask this. Did Mr. Dukes, when you met with him that day with his attorney, did he appear to be under the influence of drugs, alcohol, or other narcotics?
He did not appear to be, no.
Over the course of your experience with law enforcement, have you seen people that have been under the influence of drugs, alcohol, or other narcotics?
I have.
Did Mr. Dukes that day exhibit any of those characteristics that would indicate that he was under the influence?
No, he just appeared to be upset. You could, how I would describe to be somebody to be upset, or not mad, or just maybe sad, or just kind of a little upset.
Now, I'm going to direct your attention now to the day of Tuesday, being February 21st of 2017. Did you meet again with this defendant, Bo Dukes, and his attorney, John Fox?
I did.
And where did that take place?
That interview was at the same location where we had met in our conference room at the GBI office in Perry. It was myself, Agent Madison Holland, John Fox, and Bo Dukes.
Okay. Paul Bowden, was Paul Bowden present for that interview?
No, to my knowledge, he was out of town that week.
And was interview, did you advise Mr. Dukes of his rights?
At the beginning of the interview, yes, I did.
Right. And how was it that you would advise Mr. Dukes of his rights?
We have a rights waiver form. It's a Miranda form that we would have, I would have filled out and read to him orally. He would have reviewed it as we're going over it together, acknowledged one of the rights. I'll do some confirmations as to the rights waiver. You know, what's your level of education? Are you under the influence of alcohol or drugs? I can understand, you know, and based on their education, I'll say, if they have an adequate, what I think is an adequate amount of education, I will say, I'm going to assume that you can read and write and understand the English language. They'll confirm, and then I usually have them read like the first right, which is I have the right to remain silent out loud, just so I can confirm that they can read and understand English.
Did you promise Mr. Dukes anything, hope of benefit to get him to speak with you?
I did not.
Did you threaten him in any way to get him to speak to you?
I did not.
Did Mr. Dukes appear to be under the influence of any alcohol, drugs, or other narcotics on this day?
No, he didn't. I'll just say he appeared to be upset again, similar to the way he was on Sunday.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 31 and ask if you will look at that, please, sir. Are you familiar with State's Exhibit number 31?
Yes, sir, I am.
What is State's 31?
State's Exhibit number 31 is the waiver of rights form that I filled out and read, subsequently read to Bo on that day of the interview.
Okay. Is that a true and accurate copy of the Miranda rights form that you completed that day with Mr. Dukes?
It is.
With regard to the handwriting on this document, State's Exhibit number 31, there's some handwriting at the top of the form. Whose handwriting is that?
Right. The first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines are my handwriting, and then it goes into he told me that. And then there are initials next to 1 through 5, which are Bo's initials. At the bottom, there's a spot with an X that says name, that is Bo's signature. Underneath it says agent's name, that is my signature. And then underneath that it says witness name, which is Agent Madison Holland's signature.
Okay. Did Mr. Dukes sign that in your presence?
He did.
Did he also sign that in the presence with his attorney there?
He did.
Any objection?
Objection.
All right, it's admitted.
Ms. Shadell, are you able to see that on the screen in front of you?
Yes, sir, I am.
Now, if you will, beginning at the top of that form, if you will, read that for us, please.
Sure, it says waiver of rights, date 2/21/2017, time 9 a.m., place GBI office, Perry. My name is Bo Dukes, period. I'm 32 years old, period. My address is 277 Wood Road. I've completed the 12th grade in school, period. I know that Jason Shadell, Madison Holland, is a special agent of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, period. He, she told me that, Number 1, I have the right to remain silent with the initials BD next to it. Number 2, anything I say can be used against me in a court of law, period, with the initials BD next to it. Number 3, I have the right to talk to a lawyer and have him present with me while I'm being questioned, period, with the initials BD next to it. Number 4, if I cannot afford to hire a lawyer, one will be appointed to represent me before any questioning if I wish, period, with BD written next to it. And 5, I can decide at any time to exercise these rights and not answer any questions or answer any question or make any statement with BD initialed next to it. I understand my rights, period. Having these rights in mind, I'm now willing to talk to a law enforcement officer, period. I have not been threatened. I have not been promised anything. I have not been forced in any way to answer any questions or make any statements, period.
The signature that's here on this line where my finger is pointing, which is the top signature, whose signature is that?
Bo Dukes.
And the signature on the second line, whose signature is that?
Mine.
And the signature on the bottom line, whose signature is that?
Madison Holland.
Who is Madison Holland?
He's a special agent with my office.
Now, with regard to each of these initials on the left side over here, whose initials are those?
Those are Bo's.
Did he initial those with regard to each of those rights?
Yes, sir.
Did he ever tell you that he didn't understand his rights?
No.
Did he ever tell you to explain any of his rights?
No.
In fact, his attorney was seated there with him when you went over the rights with him. Is that
Yes,
right?
sir, he was.
Did any of them ask you to explain any of those rights or go over any of those rights any further?
No, sir.
Now, in regards to this interview that you did with this defendant, Bo Dukes, on February 29th,
was.
And how was that interview recorded?
Video.
Show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 32, and ask you to look at that, please.
Okay.
Are you familiar with State's Exhibit 32?
I am.
How are you familiar?
State's Exhibit number 32 is a DVD-R disc containing interview recordings that we did that day with Mr. Dukes.
Okay. Have you reviewed State's Exhibit 32, that recording, prior to coming to court today?
I have.
And does it truly and accurately represent the interview that you did with Bo Dukes with his attorney present on February 21st of 2017?
Yes, it is.
Now, Agent Shell, I believe there's two different, I guess, tracks, if you will, on that disc. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And so what is the difference between the tracks and why there are two different tracks?
As we finished, we got to a point of the interview where we took a break, and so I paused the recording. It was towards the end of the interview, but we took a break, and I wanted to consult with one of the other agents just to confer about what we had talked about during that portion of the interview, make sure that I haven't missed anything or thought that we missed anything during the interview to ask. We took a break. It wasn't a very long break, and then we come back in. I restarted the interview recording as soon as we sat it down and started interviewing again. It was another short interview, so it's just in two different parts of the recording.
Your Honor, this time I was in State's Exhibit number 32.
Your Honor, we would do our objections that were made during Jackson.
All right, this is admitted. Objection is noted.
Thank you.
Mr. John Fox, President of the UV. Today's date is February 21st, 2017. Time is 9 a.m. And obviously we're at the GBI office here in Perry, and I've taken the liberty to go ahead and fill out the rights waiver form. Mr. John Fox, President of the UV, as well as Madison Holland with GBI. Today's date, time, we're at the GBI office in Perry. Says my name is Bo Dukes. I'm 32 years old. My address is 277 Wood Road. That's in Milledgeville, Georgia. I know you graduated from high school. You got some college too, don't you?
Yeah, some college.
Okay. I'm going to assume you can read, write, and understand English language.
Okay.
You're not under the influence of any alcohol or drugs.
No.
Okay. I've completed 12th grade school, and then Jason Shadell and Madison Holland are special agents of the Georgia Bureau Investigation. He told me that. Just read number one so I can verify you can read and write.
I have a right to
Anything I say can be used against me in court of law. I have a right to talk to a lawyer having present with me while I'm being questioned. Obviously, Mr. Fox is your attorney. He's here today. If I can afford to hire a lawyer, want to be appointed representative before any question if I wish, I can decide at any time and exercise these rights and not answer any questions or make any statements. Do you understand your rights?
No.
Having these rights in mind, are you willing to talk to me?
Yes.
I've not been threatened. I'm not been promised anything. I can't give you $1 million. I can't beat you up. Okay? I have not been forced in any way to answer any questions or make any statements. What I need you to do is sign your name right here, place your initials next to each number. Acknowledge each right. Sorry, that. Alrighty. What I would like to do is I'm going to just kind of leave it, open the floor to you, and just tell me how it came to be about you knowing about Tara and everything.
Okay. I'll start. That Saturday night, I was at our house. Ryan was there. A few people came over. We were drinking, and I passed out, went to sleep, woke up the next morning, or actually somewhere early afternoon or something. Ryan woke me up and said that he told me that he had, this was the next Sunday, told me that he had killed Terry Grinstead. I thought he was, I didn't believe him, I thought it was not. I told him, leave me alone, let me go back to sleep. The next day, I think it was the next day, his brother, who also lived with us, came home and told me that she was missing. And I told him what Ryan had told me that the day before. And he didn't say anything about it, really, just kind of ignored it. I think I asked Ryan again a couple of days later, like that Wednesday, after I seen everything in the media going on, and he told me yes, he had. And I didn't believe him. And he asked me to come with him out to the Pecan Orchard. And I went with him. And we drove back into the back. And he showed me where her body was. And freaked out, kind of. I asked him what the hell had happened. He told me that he had gone to her house that night, used a credit card to get him through the front door lock, and strangled her into bed. And then brought her body to the orchard. But they had stopped in Fitzgerald at a dumpster behind the laundry mat there, and found her purse and keys in the laundromat. I don't know if he was trying to put her body in the dumpster too, get to it, and say anything like that. And he asked me to help him get rid of her body, and I agreed to help him. And there was a shelter out there that was full of firewood, split wood and fat lighter. And we used that in my truck and moved her body to wood area. There was a bunch of wood, and we burned it over a period of like 2 days.
Okay. All right. So this is Saturday night. I'm presuming this is the same Saturday night that the pageant was going on, the sweet potato pageant.
I believe so.
And at the time, where were you staying at?
It was a trailer across from the hospital in Fitzgerald, across the street.
In Fitzgerald.
That's right.
You don't remember the address, do you?
It's not there anymore.
Who were you living with there?
Ryan and Steve.
Ryan Duke.
Stephen Duke, his brother.
Stephen Duke. How old is Stephen compared to Ryan?
I think he's 2 years younger.
So he's probably 30 now.
Yes.
And you and Ryan were in the same grade together.
That's right.
Okay.
I think there were a few people that came over that night.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. You remember who they might have been?
Yeah.
I mean, they got an inner circle of friends. I mean, that's...
Yeah, it was Bill McMahon. He's dead now.
What did he die of?
Cancer. Zane Dill. And I think a girl named Hannah Skeen. I want to say that's the same night that all three of them that they were there.
Okay. And y'all were having like a get together, and you'd been drinking.
Yeah.
And you said you kind of passed out.
Yeah. Or went to sleep. I don't think I even passed on.
All right. And so Sunday, you remember about what time it was that you passed out and went to sleep? And when was the last time that night you saw?
Probably close to after midnight.
So obviously, so Ryan going over there would have been probably early Sunday morning rather than...
Yeah.
Okay. So Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, you remember about what time it was?
No.
After lunch, before lunch?
Probably after lunch. No, I'm not 100% sure about that.
So Ryan woke you up?
Good.
What was his demeanor like? I mean, was he like in shock? I mean...
Yeah, he was not. It was not acting normal.
Did anybody else hear him tell you this?
No.
So it was just the two of you? And he just flat out said, I went to her house?
No, he didn't tell me that until
Later.
later.
Okay. He just told you on Sunday, I killed Terry Grinstead.
Yeah. I didn't know what was going on in his mind.
So you just, at the time, you thought he was just kind of messing with you.
Yeah.
But y'all all knew Terry.
I didn't really know. I had a class in high school. I had a contemporary American history class. But no, I didn't know her outside of school.
Okay. Did Ryan know her?
Not that I know of. I don't know if he had a class or not in high school.
Okay. I mean, I guess that's my thing is, I mean, of all the people,
No connection.
why Tara? What's the connection?
As far as I know, he didn't know her.
Did you know if she ever had any other connections with any other students?
No.
Okay, so Monday, so all day Sunday, he just tells you this one thing, nothing else gets said. I know this is thinking back a long time. Do you remember what he was wearing?
No.
Okay. What about the night of the party?
No idea.
All right. So Monday rolls around now. Nothing else gets said on Sunday at all.
No, the only conversation I told Stephen what he had told me that day.
You told Stephen.
I don't think it was until Wednesday, until I asked him about it again.
Okay.
That was that Wednesday.
So what was Stephen's reaction to it? I mean, you just told his brother said he killed somebody.
Disbelief. He just ignored it.
Like he might have already known?
No, I don't think so. But I don't know if they had any conversations about
I
it.
mean, were they close enough? Would he have helped him?
I don't know.
Have you ever had any conversations with Stephen since then about this?
No.
Okay. So Monday rolls around, did you hear about, when's the first time that you heard the next thing about Tara?
From Steve. That's,
So he came to you that Monday?
yeah, that Monday afternoon.
And what did he tell you?
That she was missing. And that's when I told him what Ryan had told me.
Okay, so you didn't tell him on Sunday, you told him on Monday what Ryan had told
Yeah.
you?
Okay.
I just want to show you these. All right. So you tell him you tell him what he told me. You said he was in somewhat disbelief, kind of like the first time he's hearing about this, you think?
Yeah.
And then nothing else gets said until Wednesday.
Right.
And by this time, there's probably 100 GBI agents already down there, a lot of law enforcement, y'all see these people, right?
Right.
And that's when you start going, okay, maybe there's something more to this, what he said.
Right.
And so you confront Ryan again
Yes.
at home?
Yes.
Okay. Was anybody else there?
No.
When did you, was this like daytime, nighttime?
Morning.
All right. And tell me that conversation again.
I asked him what he meant the other day when he told me he had killed her. And he said that he had, and he said, I'll show you. And
So you did it again that he killed her? And then he said, I'll show you. So you load up in your truck,
that's right.
and you were driving the F-150 at the time, that white one?
That's right.
And I guess it's, you don't have that truck anymore or anything like that?
No, it was total in 2009.
Okay.
On Ford Stewart.
Okay. So he's driving, you're driving?
He's driving.
And so he drives you out to the orchard out on Bowensville Highway?
That's right.
Just, I know I showed you these photos, I went ahead and printed some color photos up again. This is the same orchard, correct?
That's right.
This one's better.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, just kind of like we did the other day, I guess we'll use this picture since this one seems to be the closest. Just
This one.
okay. Draw me just put on there when he took you out there, where did he park the car?
It was over here in this area, maybe even a little further down.
Okay.
Everybody was laying
And the little little shed you're talking about's right here, isn't it?
Yeah, it's on the other side of the pond. So I guess it's probably right around here.
Okay.
And her body was laying right on the side of the orchard.
Will you do me a favor, draw a icon, like a little rectangle where the vehicle was parked?
Around here. Well, it's probably in this first row.
Okay. And then where the other icon is here, this is where you're saying where the body was? All right. Tell me when he takes you to this orchard, and is the body covered up with anything? Is it clothed?
No, it was not clothed at all. And it wasn't covered up with anything. It was laying face up in some knee-high grass.
Okay, but you could like just see it unless you, I mean, if you were walking by, you'd see it, but like just, like if you were parked over here, you probably couldn't be able to see it, right?
No. I mean, but if you were, it wouldn't be too far away, you could see it.
Okay.
I mean, maybe 2 rows over.
And you said it was laying face up?
Yeah.
Did you know who it was by looking at her? The body?
Yes. I mean, he'd already told me who it was, so I guess I was already expecting that, but...
And you had her for a class still resembling her?
Yeah, I mean, it was discolored, I mean, I guess blood pool, there had been ants on her.
Was there any other marks or scars or anything, gunshots, knife wounds?
Marks on her neck.
Can you describe the marks on her neck?
Almost like bruising, I guess. Not extremely noticeable, but they're there.
Were there like lines or
Not really.
anything like really distinct? Okay. So by this time you're probably freaking out.
Yeah.
Okay. So you immediately see this and you're like, what in the hell did you do?
Yeah. And why the fuck would you do it here on my family's big orchard? I mean,
What did he say?
help me. That dude, she messed up and he needed my help. I was angry.
Is that when he told you what had happened?
Yes.
Go through that again, tell me.
I asked him exactly what had happened. He told me later that night, after everybody had gone, after I was asleep, he drove to Fitzgerald, drove to her house, and he said it was late, very late, that night. And he had used a credit card to get in through the front door. He jumped on her while she was in bed and strangled her right there in her bed. And then he had moved her body with the truck. I don't know, in the front seat, the back seat, or
Your truck?
Yes. He was using my truck. He didn't have a vehicle at the time. And then he had driven back to Fitzgerald, but stopping at that dumpster behind the laundromat.
Okay.
And then to the orchard. He had only been there a few times. I'm surprised he hadn't found the place.
Okay. So she strangled her, killed her on her bed, and then loaded her body up in your truck? Did he say anybody else helped him?
No.
about to add a dumpster. Behind the laundromat and fish room?
Yeah, right on 129.
To their keys and purse?
That's right.
Anything else? What about clothes?
I can't remember what he said about the clothes. Whether he had left them in their house or brought them. I can't remember exactly.
Describe for me a little bit more of this laundromat. I know you said it's on 129. Where exactly are we talking about here?
If you're coming north from Osceola, you pass Burger King, Sonic, it'll be up on your right. There's a little strip mall with a Verizon store and a Subway. It's that laundromat that's in that strip mall. I think he had a...
Right there behind like the White Horse and Pizza Hut?
right after that. Right. I think he had an aunt or some kind of family member that either worked there or owned the place. Right?
Okay. And he never told you why he did it? I mean,
No, he never...
why her?
Never said why or...
I mean, even to this day, he's never disclosed why?
No.
Okay. So he stops at the laundromat before he goes to the orchard. Keys, purse, maybe clothes, we're not sure. Then drives to the orchard. You said he's only been there a couple times. So, I know you said before that I guess y'all used to throw parties out here.
I've thrown like one.
Okay.
Two before, maybe two. That's right. A couple years before.
Okay, so that's why you're really even more surprised because it's been a couple years since you've been out there.
It's not like we went out there very often.
But I mean, he's familiar with the area. Y'all grew up together, lived together.
Yeah.
Y'all may have even been riding up and down Bowensville Highway, and he knows.
Yeah.
Okay, so, okay. I'm gonna write on this truck body. Now, at some point, obviously you didn't burn right here, you moved it to another location.
Right.
Where about on this is, just draw and put an X where you think that location is where you're gonna take us today.
I think it's right about here.
So it's back a little ways.
Yeah.
And were the parties thrown back here?
Nah, I think I built a fire, right?
I'm just gonna put a fire pit, and we'll use that as the area.
I'd have a party about right here.
Okay.
This pond at the time went shrunk down, so I built a fire in the edge of it.
What about this area? I mean, obviously this is now, and so these trees are grown up.
Right.
Were there trees here then?
It was wooded then too.
Was there any worry of like catching the rest of the woods on fire or something, or was there already something there kind of, did y'all go to like a hollow area in there where it wouldn't burn everything? How did y'all manage the fire?
Didn't really, there wasn't like a hollow area or anything. I think it did end up catching some woods on fire the next day.
Did anybody ever come back to you and say, hey, was anybody out there, do you know if anybody was burning or anything?
My uncle did one time. And
That's
asked me,
Connor?
Randy Hudson.
Okay.
That was a couple weeks later, he asked me if I had a party that day because the fire had gotten away from somebody.
Okay.
Earlier.
And And that's Randy.
Yeah, I told him that.
You told him, yeah, we had a party.
I told him that, I didn't know anything about it.
All right. So, new body, no clothes, not sure where they may be. She had ants on her. She had some discoloration, like blood pooling, like she'd been there a little bit.
Yeah.
You're freaking out, you're mad, he's probably begging for help at this point.
Yeah.
Why you?
I was the closest person to him. I mean, I don't think. And it was already here. I mean, it was already at my family's place. I think he thought I would be more likely to help in this situation.
So you did help him. You moved the body from here to here?
Yes.
Would that be loaded in the back of the truck and drive down and then
Yes.
carry it into the woods?
You could drive right to that spot then.
Okay. Like, kind of like, right. Looks like there's a discoloration here where you split road or something.
Yeah, there's a trail and there was another trail that branched off too. I'm not sure it's still there.
You can pretty much go right to the area.
I think so, yeah.
I mean, you can pretty much go there and go, yeah, it's probably right in that little 5-foot area.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Then, so if you put the body here, y'all drive back to that shed, load up the wood in the,
Truck.
yeah, I'm thinking the other type of wood, the fat wire, and then drove it back over there, pile the wood on top.
That's right.
So you basically, you said it took a couple days. Did y'all like light the fire, burn it, leave, come back, or did y'all just stay out there and watch it burn?
It was left and came back a couple times.
And each time it got a little bit less of the body, a little bit less of the body.
Yeah, we put add more wood.
You can still, after the first burn, you can still see
Yeah.
the body,
Yeah.
just kind of like charred.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, was there any like jewelry or anything on her that you wear, or was it just completely new body?
I think she was wearing a belly button ring.
Okay. You remember what it looked like?
Not really, no.
Like diamondy or
I
bling?
think it was just plain.
Do you remember if it was on the upper half or the lower half of the belly button?
I don't remember.
Any other jewelry that you can think of? Any tattoos? Anything like that? Okay. So you said it took several days,
2 days.
2 days. So by Friday, there's nothing left.
No.
But you can, I mean, nothing like, there's probably some little smaller bones or stuff like that y'all just kind of left there.
It looked like it was all ash to me.
And y'all were like kicking the pile and trying to find other things, y'all just left it.
Yeah.
I'm assuming at this point, I mean, it's not like a sports victory, you know, y'all are high-fiving and, you know, what conversations are taking place at this point or during all of this? I mean, what are y'all talking about?
I can't remember a whole lot about it. I remember asking him, you know,
More details?
several times why, and he, you know, never could never tell me. And I just don't remember a lot about our conversations during.
It seems kind of random. It seems to me like you probably had something going on with her that y'all didn't know about.
He did, I didn't know about it.
We never hit it around afterward that there was anything. Okay.
I never heard of them having any kind of relationship before.
Okay. So to this day, you still don't know why he did it.
No. I asked him if he was there to rape her, or kidnap her, and he said they did not, and did not.
Had he ever asked you to do this before?
No.
Or since?
No.
Did he ever say that he kept anything from her?
No.
Okay, so it's all done. Y'all leave. I know at some point y'all, there was a separation, y'all moved.
We moved to another place in Fitzgerald before then. And then,
So after this is, okay, so we're in October
yeah,
when this is all happening. So now we're moving after this, y'all moved.
right,
Where did y'all move to again?
to a house in Fitzgerald. I think off Merrimack. I'm not sure about the name of the road there. It's also not there anymore. It's been torn down.
All right. And then, so I mean, at this point, this investigation is going on. I mean, there's no doubt that there's searches going on, everything.
Yeah.
I mean, any more conversations about just keep your mouth shut kind of thing? We're just going to keep our mouth shut?
Yeah.
So when we go to talk to Ryan, I know that he's contacted you on Facebook. Has he contacted you anymore since Thursday?
No.
And that was just like a, hey, how you doing? Or was it something more specific?
It was nothing to do with this. It felt like he was just kind of filling me out to see if I would mention something about this.
If he thought that you had told me, do you think he would tell me, come off of it?
Maybe.
I mean, this has been weighing on you, and this is one of the questions I have. I mean, why now? I mean, you see what I'm saying? I mean,
Yeah. He might. I don't know if he's ever mentioned it to anyone else.
like his boyfriend.
Maybe. I don't know if they've ever spoken about it or not.
Okay. All right. Remember when I interviewed you back in June, I asked you about this soldier
Yeah.
that you had been in the military with.
Yeah.
When he came home and y'all arrived conscience is one of the reasons why you have a conscience and you have some feelings, then this has been bothering you for a long time. I think it was bothering you then, and you told them.
I don't remember the conversation I had. It's certainly, obviously.
I mean, he said exactly what you just told me, that you burned the bottom.
I don't remember the conversation with him, but I guess we're probably drinking a lot that night.
More than likely, you told him.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, this is just a simple question, but why didn't you tell me then what you're telling me now? I mean, you had the opportunity to tell me if there was anything else that you think is important for me to know, or when I got your DNA.
Been keeping the secret a long time. Yeah, I guess I didn't think it was time yet.
Have you ever been on any of the message boards when Terry went missing?
No.
And they're trying to give any like hints or something to add conscience or anything? Okay. And most recently, you've told somebody else.
Yeah.
What you're telling me? Who was that?
Brooke Sheridan.
Who else? Anybody?
My ex-wife.
Who's that?
Emily Stillman.
When did you tell her?
2008 or 2009.
What did she say back then?
She was surprised. My friend Dustin Troublin.
Troublin?
T-R-O-G-L-I-N.
T-R-O-G.
G-L-I-N. I think he also used his last name Warren. I think he just changed it for some reason.
They all live local?
No, Dustin lives in Portland.
Oregon?
Yeah. Emily lives in Cameron Mills, New York.
Cameron Mills?
Yeah. I told two guys a couple months after it happened, one night, Reese Jones and Cliff Benson.
What were they then?
So
You still have to get in touch with all those people? You have phone numbers for them, stuff like that?
some of them.
What about Emily? I'm sure you probably still. Could you give me that number? Let's just go through all of them. I mean, obviously, you know, I've talked to Brooke.
Yeah.
Okay. I told her to tell you that I talked to you, and we'll talk to her.
And then later 607
Mrs. Emily, 607
438
438
0976.
0976. Dustin?
Nine
971
269
269
5649.
5649. About Reese or Cliff?
I think I have Reese's number. 229-402-8750.
Okay, and that's Reese.
That's right.
And you told, you said you told Emily in 2008, 2009. When did you tell Dustin?
In 2007, 2008.
And then Reese
Reese was probably that same time period too. It was in Korea.
And then you said in Korea?
That's right. It's before we got married.
And then Reese and you lived right after it happened?
Yeah, it was a couple months. I told him one night they mentioned to someone else, and that person asked me, and I've denied it to them.
Who was the person that came and asked you?
It's Hank McMahon.
That's the person who passed away?
No, that's his brother.
Okay. Ben, says Ben's brother.
Yeah.
So that would make sense why, when we've gotten a lot of information about some of this stuff, that kind of makes sense why we were hearing that back then. Because you had already put it out there because you're conscious, didn't you? Okay. Anybody else ever approach you about it?
Like I said.
Okay. Who's, besides you and probably his brother, who were the closest people to Ryan? In your inner circle. If he's going to trust somebody besides you, who would it have been?
I want a lot of people really. Maybe Reese and Cliff. No, maybe not really.
But I mean, you told them and their response was what? Of shock? So,
Yeah, they thought I was making it up. But
okay. All right. So we're talking today. Why are we talking today? You didn't want to disclose it then. You feel like now is the best time?
yeah,
Why?
I'm ready to end this like someone. I'm tired of living like this. But,
It's been bothering you a long time?
yeah,
Affecting you, everything?
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, stuff you can't even tell a therapist. You know, it's like you have issues and you want to talk to somebody and that you can't tell anybody shit like this. I mean,
Because you've been wanting to talk about this for a long time.
yeah.
And I'm not going to go into other things that just happened in your past, but some of the things, the drugs and maybe drinking and stuff has probably been a cause for some of this, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of like a snowball that's just been rolling downhill on you. So if I were to go to Ryan and we sit down, we start talking, and we get his DNA, I know that we've collected some evidence on the scene from Tara's house that has DNA. Do you think any of that's going to match? Did he ever talk about using gloves or?
I asked him about the gloves. He told me that he didn't use gloves. So.
Okay. Did y'all ever go back by the house?
No.
Even on the next morning, do you know if he went back by the house? Got him some help with something, or maybe check the scene out, make sure it was all? Did he ever revisit the scene that you know of?
I
Or?
don't think so. It's all me.
Okay. Did he specifically say he never used gloves?
Yeah.
Or is that just something you were thinking? You specifically asked him about it at the time.
I asked him.
When did you ask him that? Because that wasn't something that didn't come out until a lot later down the road.
I couldn't tell you that. It was sometime after it came out then.
Okay.
Obviously.
I mean, the glove didn't come out until 2009, 2008, 2009.
I would have been way before then. No, this was that year, 2005 or so.
Right when it happened.
So I must have just asked him if he would gloves or something.
Okay.
So until last year when he messaged me, I hadn't spoken to him since 2007.
Okay. So you haven't spoken to him. He messaged you, said, about a year ago?
Yeah, last March, I think.
And what was the...
It was just, hey, how you doing?
Does he have a phone number that you know? Do you even know his phone number?
No idea.
Okay. So the last times he's got in touch with you was past Thursday, which today is the 21st, 20th, 16th of February, and then before that, you said it was about a year and a half before that?
It was, I can almost tell you. Because he messaged me and a friend of ours the same night. And she messaged me the next day, March 9th. So it would have been March 8th.
So March the 8th of 2016?
Yeah.
And that was Facebook also?
Yep. He was messaging her that night too. You might want to talk to her.
What's her name?
Benja Kendall Luke.
Y'all went to school together, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen her. You guys are... And I'm just going to show you a picture. I know this is talking about the same Ryan dude, right?
Yep.
That's him now.
Looks like him.
Big difference.
So,
Looks like he's carrying a lot more stress and pressure on him for the last 10 years than you are. Doesn't it?
could be.
I mean, that's a big difference, ain't it?
Yeah. Well, these are all touched up.
I know, but
Except for mine.
Right there. Right next to him.
Holy shit.
Same people though, right?
Yeah.
Right. Long time ago.
Yeah.
All right. And before that, the last time you talked to him was 2007.
That's right. It's right before I left for Korea. I'd come home for a month, and I met him one night out at his parents' house in Puerto.
And that's the address I have is still with Pleasure Lake. So do you think he's still living out there?
I have no idea. I asked him the other night, what he didn't tell me where it was.
Okay. I think his parents' last name is a little different. I think his mom's last name, but they divorced.
O'Neill.
Yeah.
That's his mom, Karen O'Neill.
Okay. Just so I can go back and I'm just trying to go back to what Brooke seemed to indicate to me too. She said that one of the reasons why you never said anything back then too was because Bobby Connor, which is your uncle, was also, he was the principal at the school. He was messing with her, with Tara too. Just, was that rumor or something you knew of?
Rumor, I think.
Okay. But that was also one of the reasons why, because this is family property, you didn't want the family name.
I thought it was possible.
Okay. Does anybody in your family know now?
No. Whoa. Oh, shit. My cousin was. I forgot about it.
Okay. You told him what that then too?
I told him one night I don't know how many years ago.
Wes
Connor.
You know how to get in touch with Wes?
Two 457-1782.
And you told him you think when again?
I couldn't even tell you a year. Maybe.
I guess it's fine.
10.
Okay. What was his response? Just
Who's this? Did I tell him?
let me ask you this: with all these people that you told, why do you think they never came forward?
I don't know. Nobody wants to be involved in this, I guess.
All right, so let's go back to, y'all moved to that house on Merrimack. From there, you went where? Did you go to Atlanta at some point?
Yeah, I went to Atlanta, stayed up there for most of the summer that next year. Before then, I started working for the city of Fitchburg for a while, and I went to school at East Central Tech for like a semester, and then I moved to Atlanta for that summer, and came back that fall, joined the Army in November.
Where was Ryan during this time?
I never saw him.
You knew in the military?
Yeah, it was before.
Because he went 2000, he went from 2004 to 2005 he was going?
Something like that. I mean, I know he was in Maryland for a short time.
That's what I'm saying, so when he got back from the military, that's when y'all moved in together?
Yeah, I think so.
You know why he was only in the military a short time?
He went AWOL or something. I'm not 100% certain about it either.
I mean, they usually charge you for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they usually just, you go back and you spend like a couple days in detention, they cut you loose. The Army doesn't really want to.
They just kind of discharge you.
For somebody that's been in that short amount of time, yeah.
Do you think he's ever done this to somebody else?
Fucking up.
It's a long time.
Think about it.
Do you know where he was stationed at when he was in the service?
Benny, I think he was going after school, I think. I don't know if he ever finished that. I think he had a Rasmussen's contract too, so I don't know.
For what?
It's pre-ranger school, but I don't know if he ever made it there.
Okay. So you don't think he ever, just because of the short amount of time he's been there, you don't think he ever went beyond?
No, I don't know if he even made it at team.
Okay. Moving forward and talking with Ryan, I mean, honestly, I mean, understanding you probably doing better than anybody else then, how do we go about talking to him? How do you feel that we need to approach him about this?
Every time that I've talked to him, from Thursday and then from a year ago, he seems totally out of it. I mean, the guy I knew could speak in full sentences with grammar. This guy, every time I talk to him, he's all over the place. And we've only spoken through messaging, but it doesn't seem like the same. I mean, just the syntax of this writing seems different than it ever was. He was a smart guy back then. He was obviously, he seems like a different, just from the small amount of time of will off. It seems way off.
Do you think this has been weighing on him like you?
I don't know.
Do you think he's ready to, if he gets confronted, do you think he'd be willing to try to do the right thing?
I think it's possible. Maybe if you had overwhelming evidence, or if he knew that I was.
That's my point. I mean,
Maybe.
you're the overwhelming evidence.
Yeah, I think it's possible.
So I'm saying, we go to him and we say, look, we talked about it's time. You think at that point he's going to know?
I don't know.
Or do you think that it would be more advantageous for you to try to talk to him, message him, you know, convince him to do the right thing?
Maybe. Honestly, I think if you went down, he's probably going to ask. He's probably not going to speak to you.
That's what I'm thinking. And that's what the worry is. We want it. Right now it's your word against his. We're trying to find everything we can. I mean, obviously finding parts and stuff like that, if we can, is important for your side, obviously, but we need to bolster his involvement as well. How do we do that?
Like if I kept talking to him,
Mm-hmm.
I think he already thinks something's up.
Right. And that's what I'm thinking is you go to him and, you know, GBI's talking to me, what the hell are you doing? Are you trying to flip it on him? Are you trying to set me up? What are you doing? I've kept this thing quiet for this long, and now all of a sudden the GBI's coming to talk to me. Are you snitching on me? Are you telling what we did? I helped you, and now you're trying to screw me over?
That could work.
See what I'm saying? We're going to flip it on him and see what his responses are. Usually when you contact him, is his responses pretty quick?
I've never contacted him. It's always been.
Like, he never responded. You responded to him Thursday, but no other response beyond that?
Yeah, no.
Okay. So if you were, I mean, obviously your only mode of communication with him is through Facebook Messenger.
That's right.
So when we leave here, if you were to Facebook Messenger him and go, what the hell? Just like we said, do you think you would get a response? Is he working anywhere that you're aware of or anything?
Not that I know of. I mean, the extent of my knowledge is he's on Facebook Messenger. I don't know where he's at, or he's.
Okay. Did you ever say that you got rid of anything else that belonged to her, or kept any trophies?
No,
Okay. Other than her purse and keys?
that's it.
Anybody else that you can think of that what about anybody that was close to him, like a girlfriend? Did he have any girlfriends, or anybody ever mentioned that was close to him during that time? Or?
He was dating some girl from Tipton at one point, but I can't remember her name or anything.
And this was during all of this time too, or?
No, it was more of an off and on thing, so maybe. I can't remember her for anything.
Anybody else that you can think of during that time that y'all were living together? Anybody else that was close to him?
His half brother,
Who was that?
James O'Neill.
I'm assuming that's his mother's or the stepfather's son.
Yeah.
Do we know where James is staying at now, or where he might be?
I don't.
Does his parents, as far as you know, still live out in Pleasure Lake?
I have never heard of them moving, but I don't know.
Okay.
Really.
You've been out there though, right?
Yeah.
To Pleasure Lake? I know the picture's kind of shady, but general area?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
It's like 3 buildings out there.
Yeah, like a little shack with a shed in the front, and then there's a house to the left.
Yeah. And house to the right.
Okay. And that's kind of like a little, I won't say family compound, but that's all family.
Yeah, I think so.
You've revisited this site
Yeah.
many times, haven't you?
Yeah. I mean, not out there. I've been in here. I used to have to spray the orchard last summer.
Tell me about that.
Fucking sucks. Terrible. Scary as fuck out there. It's dark. All the tractor out there at night. And then I went out there to work one time.
Was that last month?
Yeah.
What mentioned that you spent about a week out there at one point in time in your truck, I guess this is afterward?
Yeah.
Just trying to find some sanity?
Something like that. I think it was like 3 days.
You want forgiveness, don't you? Okay. Is there anybody else you can think of that knows, has known, anybody else you told? What about Ryan? Does Ryan ever say that he's gone back out there to you after the fact, or
Not to me.
do you think he has?
I doubt it. It'd be tough to explain him being out there.
So if we tell them, we've got agents out there where everything happened, those ever talked, we're going to give you an opportunity to if you feel comfortable to do what we said, I think that's, I don't want to go to him and him turn around and go, shit, I helped Bo do that crap. I didn't do that. He's the one that did it.
Right.
Because he's got the same knowledge that you have as far as what happened.
Right.
He's the one who used the credit card. He's the one that threw a person keys away. I mean, anything that you can think of that we can use to show, and I believe you 100%. I mean, you're the one here talking to me, not him. So I'm not worried about that, but I've got to prove it too. It's not what I know, it's what I can prove.
Right. Beyond getting him to say something to me, I can't think of anything.
I mean, and would he even say anything on Facebook Messenger? Would he say, we gotta meet?
He might say we gotta meet.
Okay. Would you be willing to meet with him if you had like a recorder on in your pocket or something, or a recorder on your phone or something going and record the conversation?
Yeah.
Okay. You okay with that, John?
I'm fine with that. You're fine with it? Yeah. If he already knows something's up, I mean,
That's what I'm trying to flip it on.
yeah.
That's the only way I can, if he thinks something's up, and I think he thinks something's up because he would have messaged you out of the blue.
Yeah.
So who else has Brooke talked to? You know, you've talked to Brooke. Well, I know she's talked to somebody else because that's how I got the information.
Well,
No, one of her friends too.
okay. It could be. You could have found out from anywhere.
All right. I mean, especially with this case, you know,
Yeah.
it's like a fire. I mean, I hate to use that terminology, but it really is. It burns anything and everybody up around.
Do y'all have any idea about where he's in it? His
I mean, I've got an address, but it's Pleasure Lake.
You haven't like seen him?
No. I mean, I've only known him since Sunday, so
Yeah.
clearly, you know, I've been there since then.
I'm worried about going to see him and put a bullet in that or something.
And trust me, that's my issues as well. Or we show up and he does something to himself or stand off, and those are things we've got to worry about. If having a conversation face to face is another story, if that goes,
Yeah.
you know, we'll try to do it not at his house.
Right.
You know, find a place that's secure enough to where we can have agents close to be, you know, maybe even have your phone line open and we're listening to the conversation as you're having the conversation. You know, we can be like a backup team ready to go. Should anything kind of turn a little sour, we can be there instantly.
He would be careful about this. I mean, there's no way I would probably be able to have a phone on. I don't.
I mean, you know, there's
ways, I guess.
when we have bugs, I mean, we can put a bug on you that we can listen to actively.
Yeah,
Stuff like that. Which is what I'm saying, we can go and interview him today, or we can pause for a day or so, start working on this, and have you work on him, and see where we can go. We lose nothing in waiting a day or two to give you an opportunity to talk to. I mean, while we're on the way down to Fitzgerald today, I mean, he could message you back, and we could start working this afternoon. I mean, it's that simple.
Let's give it a shot.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else that I have left out that I have not talked about that you think is important moving forward in this? Any minor details, toenail polish, fingernail polish that she had on at the time that you could see? I mean, anything. And you're certain it was Tara, beyond him telling you.
I'm certain.
I mean, did she appear, I mean, this is, did she appear to be shaved?
Yeah.
You know what I mean by that? Or the vagina area was shaved?
Yeah, yeah. I think there was a little hair there, not completely shaved.
Okay. No other scars, marks, or anything that you remember seeing? You remember seeing the blood pooling? Was it on her front or was it on her back?
On her back. And like, I don't know, there was ants all over. Let's see.
But there wasn't any blood on the outside. There was no,
No.
just the strangle. You said strangle.
Yeah, discoloration.
Did he ever say what he used?
His hands.
Okay. But no other bruising like he punched her or anything, just strangled her.
No, it didn't look like that. I mean, everything looks sort of weird. I mean, I've seen dead bodies since then, but nothing after, like, it's been sitting outside for 5 days, so it looked, just everything was kind of like slipping and looking.
When y'all were moving her, was there any bursting of the body or anything like that? She stayed intact?
Yeah.
And I know you said you've been out there. Have you been to that location since then? To like look around or see if there's been any?
No, just that one night with Buck, and you couldn't see anything. It was pitch dark.
Okay. The night you went out there?
Yeah.
Yeah, she said that you got out of the car and walked into the woods. She didn't go.
Yeah. It was too dark soon.
Okay. Beyond, what you talked about, is there any other motivation that has moved you to do what you're doing now? Just trying to move past it in your life?
I guess it's always bothered me that her family never knew to. And just for her, it's fucked up. It always has been.
I mean, she never did anything to you to be a teacher, or probably to him as well.
Yeah,
I'm just kind of wondering what his motivation was.
me too. I mean, he had never spoken about her before this. I mean, it's just completely out of left field, yeah. I think he just knew, it could have been anybody. I think he just knew that she lived alone and knew where she lived.
And you said you used a credit card to get in the door.
Yeah, some kind of card.
Okay. She was asleep on her bed, you jumped on her bed, while she was asleep and strangled her.
That's right.
Is it possible that he could have had some sort of relationship or secret romance or met her at a bar? And y'all frequented like white boys and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is it possible you met her at the bar and you're not aware of it, or they had some conversations?
It's possible, but I'm not aware of it.
Okay. I know cell phones, the way they are now is a lot different, but did you have a cell phone back then? Did he have a cell phone back then?
I don't think I had a cell phone back then. I think he might have. I can't remember if I had one or not.
I mean, was there ever an occasion where you were out doing whatever and ran across her, ran into her, saw her, had any conversation with her, even at a bar or grocery store?
No.
Okay. When did you get back from the military?
I got out in June of 13.
Have you lived out on Wood Road the whole time? Since then, or?
The whole prison thing. Yeah, since then.
All right. Anybody else you can think of, that any other brothers, cousins, uncles, nephews, friends that you've disclosed anything to besides the ones you've already said?
No, I never said anything to my brother or.
Does Hannah and Zane and, his brother, McMahon's brother.
Good.
Yeah. Do they still stay around Minnesota area, as far as you know?
Ben's good.
Yeah, I'm not saying his brother, the one that.
Hank?
Hank.
Yeah, he's around there, still somewhere around there.
We're taking long notes here. Wes? Wes still
He
around?
lives in Atlanta.
Hank. Did you ever know Ryan to carry any weapons or use weapons? Pocket knives, always carry a pocket knife or other kind of guns or anything that you ever saw or any other kind of weapons back then?
He never carried a gun. Or I don't think he ever really carried a knife either.
I mean, had you ever seen him act out violently towards anyone before, at a party, drunk, or anything like that?
Never. Never seen him get in a fight with anybody.
Never seen him lose control? No ex-girlfriends have ever come forward that you've heard of say anything to the contrary or anything?
No.
Well, like I said, I know that y'all's contact has been limited. Do you think that that contact has been limited because of this?
Absolutely. I didn't want to talk to him. No.
Okay. Is there anything else you can think of? Any other details? Do you want to take like a 5 or 10 minute break and then
Yeah, let's take a break.
I'll go outside and get a good bathroom and we'll come back in? Or?
Before we continue on, let's take a short recess. Members of the jury, if you'll make yourselves comfortable in the jury room, we'll take a short recess. All right, we'll be in recess.
the duration, it don't matter now. That's fine, I'm not even. Yeah, I live in Warner Robins. Yes, sir. I grew up there, went to Houston County High School, and then I left to get college to Thomasville. And, I graduated in '95, and I stayed in Thomasville. I had a baseball scholarship, so I played baseball in college. So I played baseball in college and graduated. And, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. That was kind of, it was that point where I knew baseball wasn't going to be a career, you know what I mean? And it's time to stop doing what you want to do and start doing what you're supposed to do, kind of thing. And so I went to the jail, I started working in the jail, because I'd done an internship, my degree was in criminal justice, so I did an internship in the jail, so listen, I liked people that were there, and so I got a job there working in the jail. Like 2 months later, I was on the road. What was it? Thomasville. I love Thomasville.
She's an athlete, right? She's over to college.
Okay. Was she an athletic trainer down there? Because we had a couple of trainers that were new with the program. How old was she? How old was she? That name's familiar. Tommy Hancock.
Yeah.
He was at Thomasville High School. Yeah. I guarantee you I know her.
I'm trying to think. She worked with some doctor.
Dr. Hancock probably at Thomasville Orthopedic Clinic.
Yeah.
Because I tore my ACL in 2000, and he did my surgery. But before, like I said, I guarantee you, because I had some shoulder issues too, because in '97 I broke my elbow pitching, like I'm on the mound. Wow, I break my elbow. It hurt so bad. And then I skipped a year and then came back and played it another year. Jason Shadell. I mean, she probably won't remember, but, and I knew, I mean, like I said, when you're a deputy and you work in this case, you know a lot of people.
Couple of years ago.
The last thing that got in trouble was texting. Texting with students. Yeah. I was a resource officer in the middle school for 3 years when I first started. Like, I came on patrol and did like civil division, and then I did school resource for 3 years. It was very difficult. Very difficult. Now, I was luckily I was at the middle school, but I was only 23 years old when I started. So I started in high school, like in the mornings when I'm out in traffic. It was, if you weren't careful, it was easy to get caught up in that kind of stuff. Luckily, like, also, we didn't have cell phones like that. I had a bag phone, maybe an old cell phone. Check on it.
It's very nice to meet you. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, right there on the right-hand side there in Haneyville? Okay, yeah, there's a big store that they put there now, because we used to hunt in Haneyville. There's a big swatch of land over there on that left-hand side if you're going towards Hawkinsville. On the left-hand side right there. And my brother used to live off of, right outside of Haneyville, down on the left down there. He used to live there when he was working on the base. And he had gotten married and he was living out with his wife. And of course, he doesn't live out there anymore.
All right,
Be seated, please. All right, let's have the jury. All right, Mr. Bigby, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Turn this on place, set track, interview.
Yes, sir. You say a second track, but this is just a continuation of the same interview?
Correct, Your Honor. It's the second
Okay.
track on the,
All right.
yes.
And the time now is 10:28. We're gonna start back up. It only took 5 minutes, man. You know, one of the things Manny and I were talking about was the common knowledge about where she lived.
Yeah, I think so. She lived right there in the middle of town.
I mean, did you know where she lived?
I didn't actually know where she lived.
Did he ever take you to the house? Did he ever take you by the house?
No.
Did you take Brooke by the house?
No. I've never been to her house,
Okay.
actually. I know where it's at.
Like generally, or?
Yeah.
Do you remember the street?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I know, I could probably guess which one, but
Like, could you like tell me what the house looked like?
no.
Okay.
And I lived in Missoula for 4 years. I mean, so streets over, but
When did you live in Minnesota?
from 99 to 02.
When you graduated? Where did you live? What was the address name? Do you remember? What street?
601 West 5th Street.
And Tara was living there at the time too, if I'm not mistaken, the same house, wasn't she?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Did Ryan live in Fisher? I mean, in Minnesota?
No, we lived out at Pleasure Road.
Okay. Was Tara, I mean, I know she was into the pageants and stuff. Did you know that she was into the pageants, or did she have some sort of other affiliation that you knew or that she was a part of?
I knew she was. I didn't really know about the cheerleaders. I think she was involved in cheerleading.
Okay.
That's what I remember from. I played football there, and I knew she was involved in cheerleading squad.
I'm assuming you've heard on the news since this all happened. I'm sure if anything ever came out or anything that we've done recently, I know it's been in the news a lot.
Yeah.
When you see those news articles, I mean, what kind of, when you hear people saying, oh, somebody, they're the ones that did it, or they're the ones that did it, you know, they're putting the blame on all these other people other than Ryan, you know.
Yeah, it's something else that accumulates on you. You know, I guess not just for her family and all, but so many people have had their reputations damaged by this. It's just another reason why to go ahead and do this. You know.
Anything else you can think of? Anything you think's important?
No.
Madison, do you have anything?
No.
Okay. As we move forward, obviously what we'd like to do is go down here today. You're good with that?
Yes.
I'm assuming did y'all ride together? Did y'all meet here?
We didn't, we met here.
Okay. What's your plans for, well, we'll get to that. Obviously, there may be some other things that come up that I want to communicate about with you. Rather than read you the waiver of rights, you understand that moving forward from this, that waiver is going to continue on. I'll remind you of it. Any conversation we have is going to be recorded. But he'll be reminded of those. You know, you're still aware that the rights waiver that you signed is still in effect. You're still willing to have conversations, so on and so forth. That's going to be any from this moment on. Obviously, that's what we're going to do. While we're driving down here, are y'all going to ride together going down, or how do y'all think it's going to?
We hadn't discussed that.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll do the logistics on that when we get done with the interview. But yeah, we'd definitely like you to show us this location. What we're going to do is we're going to go to this one first, show us this one, we can document it, and then we'll go to this location.
Okay.
We'll probably pull in down the one with the big white picket fence. We'll just pull in that way. It seems to be the easiest way to get back to that corner. Or the orchard is through that, because I drove it yesterday, and the orchard looks to be solid.
There's one other way into it too.
Okay. Well, this seems to be like the easiest way.
Yeah.
We'll go past that shed on the left, and then just turn around. Okay. Well, the time now is 10:35.
I want to ask you a couple of questions about the interview that you did there with Mr. Dukes. Is it unusual to use tactics with suspects when you're interviewing them?
No, it's not unusual.
Okay. When I say tactics, can you explain kind of what I mean by that?
What I believe you mean is just different ways that we'll approach somebody and talk to them to try to get them to open up or talk about things that are an uncomfortable topic to talk about. Obviously, we're involved in criminal investigations. Usually persons that have committed offenses don't usually want to talk about them, so to get them to open up, there are different ways that you can use to try to get them to open up and talk to them.
Now, in this interview, you talked with him about taking a recording device and recording conversations between he and Ryan Duke. Did that ever occur?
No. He contacted him via Facebook Messenger that afternoon and that evening. Had a conversation with him via the Facebook Messenger, which he then sent to us later.
But there was no where he was sent in with a recording device to have a conversation with Ryan or anything like that?
No.
All right. Now, during the interview, Mr. Dukes tells you about a laundromat where some things were. Did you go to that location? Are you familiar with where that laundromat is?
I am.
And can you tell me about that, please?
Yeah, we went by. I can't remember exactly what day off the top of my head, but I did go by the laundromat, viewed the laundromat, and took photographs of. There's some dumpsters on the backside. I just took overall photographs of the dumpsters that were there in that parking lot area.
Now,
I believe it was the same day after we had finished going down to the orchard with Bo that day. I think when we got done with that, we stopped by. I think Agent Holland was with me. We stopped by there, took some photographs, and then we were going to do another interview.
Now, this was in 2017 when you went to the laundromat, is that right?
Yes, sir, if I recall.
Now, did you find any keys or a purse there that would have belonged to Ms. Grinstead?
No, sir, we did not.
through your investigation, were you able to confirm that in fact Ms. Grinstead did have a belly button ring?
Yes.
In 2016, at the time that you interviewed John McCullough, was there an open investigation into the disappearance and to what happened to Ms. Grinstead?
In 2016, when I talked to John?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And then still in 2017, when you talked with Bo, was it still an open investigation at that time?
Yes.
And with regard to the GBI, y'all are a state agency of investigation from the state of Georgia, is that right?
Yes, sir, we are.
Now, you mentioned just a few minutes ago that following this interview on February the 21st of 2017 with Mr. Duke and Mr. Fox about going to the orchard itself, is that right?
Correct.
And when we talk about the orchard, what are we talking about? What is the orchard?
It's a pecan farm that was, it's just north of the city of Fitzgerald on the right-hand side. I'd say, you know, a couple mile to 2 miles just north of Fitzgerald on 129, Bowensville Highway. You can see it from the road as you're driving past, but the gate that we used to go in is an actual, there's a residence, there's like a long white fence, and then you turn into that fence and it pulls back into, it's cut now, but there was trees on both sides. So you couldn't really see. There's 2 metal sheds that were out there as you pull down in the road, and there's an orchard. That whole orchard is on your left. And there was a little pond. If you remember when we were talking about the interview and I showed him the photographs, he was talking about a little pond that was by these sheds. And then we would turn left to go down into that back corner of the orchard. And as we got down pretty close to that corner, they stopped the vehicle and got out and described.
You say they got out, who you're referring to?
Mr. Fox and Bo and myself and Agent Holland. We had some other agents there. I can't remember who all was there at the time, but we did have some other agents there. And initially, when we were doing the interview, he pointed out an area of where the body originally was in the orchard when he first saw it. So that's the location where he stopped and pointed out to that this is the general area where that body was located when he first brought me out here. Talking about Ryan bringing Bo out there back in 2005. And then, so we were videoing as we were doing this. And then we moved further down into we all parked at the corner right there because the little road that goes off in the woods, so we just parked on the corner of that orchard and we all walked into the woods together, turning down a little lane there initially and trying to find the area where they had burned the body.
Okay. I'm going to show you a series of photographs. This being States Exhibits 33 through 37. And ask if you'll look at each of those, please, sir.
Sure. You want me to describe each one?
Just look at all of them first.
Yes. Okay.
With regard to each of those exhibits, State Exhibits 33 through 37, are you familiar generally with what's shown in each of those photographs?
I am.
And generally what is shown in each of those photographs?
State's Exhibit number 33 is a photograph, as I was describing that location just before you get to that corner to walk down into the woods. He's walking us in this picture. This is a still shot from the video, but he's walking us to the location where the body was originally at when he first saw it, at the orchard, which is on the right-hand side there as you're going down the last row of that orchard.
Let me do, before we do a great description of it, generally with regard to each of those photographs, do they truly and accurately depict the orchard there that you went to with Mr. Dukes?
Yes, sir, they do.
And are you shown in those photographs yourself?
I am. Myself and Agent Holland are in several of these.
All right. Do each of those photographs truly and accurately depict the orchard as you saw it back on February 21st of 2017 when you went with this defendant, Mr. Dukes?
They do.
All right. Judge, at this time I would tender State's Exhibits 33 through 37.
Any objection? All right, they're admitted.
The blue shirt is obviously Bo. He's still wearing the same shirt that he had on during the interview. I'm the one standing to his right, and Agent Holland is the one standing in the back. So closest, in the photo closest to.
What is this area we're looking at generally and then more specifically?
This is the back corner of the orchard. If you're looking at it in the direction where you see the pine trees, kind of right above where my head is on the photo in this photograph, there you'll see the last pine tree or the last pecan trees right there as this row ends. There's a little dirt lane that cuts into those pine trees right there, just about where my head is at in that photograph. And on the right-hand side right here towards this corner, this back corner is where Bo pointed out the body was originally placed.
Agent Still, if Your Honor please, and may he step down just for a second?
Yes. You know, to be sure the court reporter can pick you up.
Yes, sir.
We'll use this, and just on this screen here, if you'll show us, indicate the area where Mr. Dukes first said he saw the body located.
Right. He was talking about this general area right in here, where he originally saw the body, which is the back corner of this orchard. He said it wasn't like right here in the orchard. He said it was just off to the side in this taller grass area. So if you're just walking out here, you couldn't see it, but if you were walking about where we were, you could walk up and readily see it.
And from that location, where would the location be to where he indicated they had moved the body?
Sure, they moved the body from this general location here, and like I said, right here about where my head is, right through here is a little dirt lane that goes off. And this is pecan trees, but this is a pine tree grove, like, you know, planted pines where somebody would farm pine trees.
Now, with regard to Bowens Mill Highway, if we're talking about Bowens Mill Highway with this photograph, where would Bowens Mill Highway be on this photograph, if you will, please?
Like this. Obviously, it's, you know, several hundred yards to the left here, but Bowens Mill Highway kind of runs like this. So it would be, obviously, you know, several hundred yards, 200 or 300 yards to the left, but it's running north and south like this.
Okay, thank you, sir. Show you State's Exhibit number 34. You able to see that, Agent Shell?
Yes, sir, I am.
Tell me about that photograph, please.
As you can see, that the little dirt lane that I was describing in the previous photograph, this is as we're actually walking down into the dirt lane, into the pine trees. You can see the pine trees there all around. This was a first little cut lane. I say cut lane, but it was, you could see it was in like there was a lane of some sort there at some point that went into that head of woods there. And obviously I'm walking with Bo right there with the blue shirt on, and Agent Holland is behind us, and you can actually see his phone in his hand. He was recording as well. But we're trying to get Bo to show us the location of where the body was burned.
Showing you State's Exhibit number 35.
Yes, sir.
What is that?
Once again, in the prior photo, you see us walking down that lane. This is as we've gotten down into that little area. You can see it's kind of open. So we're trying to get him to try to remember where exactly the burned area was located, where they may have burned the remains.
State's Exhibit 36.
Yes, sir. Once again, this is the same area. We're having a discussion, you know, trying to get him to remember if this is the right area. He was struggling a bit to try to point out the exact area. He presumed that this was the right area at that time.
And State's Exhibit number 37.
Once again, same area where we were. I mean, same clothing, obviously. Same location, that same general little open area where he originally thought that that's where the body may have been burned.
Now, after Mr. Dukes had indicated locations of where the body may have been burned there in where Ms. Grinstead's body had been burned there in the orchard, that afternoon, did you go to another location to see a person known as Ryan Alexander Duke?
I did,
And where did you go to see Ryan Alexander Duke?
at his residence on Pleasure Lake.
And did you actually make contact and speak with Ryan Alexander Duke on that same day, February 21st of 2017?
I did.
Following your seeing Ryan Alexander Duke on February 21st of 2017, did you schedule an interview with Ryan Alexander Duke?
I did for the following day,
And where was that interview to occur?
at the Osceola Police Department at 1 o'clock.
So on the following day, that is on February the 22nd of 2017, did you in fact interview Ryan Alexander Duke?
I did, along with Agent Holland. Madison Holland, since there's two of them.
With regard to Mr. Duke, during that interview, did you take buccal swabs or DNA from Mr. Duke at that time?
I did.
Tell me how you did that, please.
Similarly, as I described with Bo, I had a search warrant for Ryan's DNA at the time. So during the interview, I advised him that I did have a search warrant for his DNA and that we were going to collect it. It's the same process as I described before. The DNA kit is in a sealed package that I'll open up right then, fill out some of the paperwork that goes along with it. There's 2 cotton swabs in a sealed paper wrap. There's a folding envelope with there's a folding piece of paper with an envelope inside, and there's some paperwork you have to fill out: social security number, date of birth, name. Get them to review that information and have them sign it. What I'll do is I'll put the gloves on after the paperwork part is filled out. I'll put the gloves on. I'll open up the little paper wrap where the cotton swabs are located. I'll pull them out. I will put one on each side of the mouth for approximately 10 seconds. Kind of do like this for just a second, let them air dry, and then I will put them into back into the same package they came out of, because it's a sterile package. Close the package, and I'll place it back into the envelope, which is in that little white folding identifier, is what I call it. That little fold goes into a cellophane bag that is sealed. Actually, excuse me, first, when you put the cotton swabs into that envelope that's in that fold, you'll seal it with a red seal, evidence tape, and initial it. Then you'll close it up, put it into the cellophane bag. After you put it in the cellophane bag, you put it into another white envelope, and you seal that up with another red evidence seal. And then there's another manila envelope with a seal kit that I'll put it in that and seal it, and then put it into another manila envelope and put red evidence tape around it, and that's what goes to the crime lab.
Okay. Did you do that with Mr. Duke's buccal swabs or DNA swabs that day?
I did.
And were they sent to the GBI crime lab for analysis?
They were.
Following your interview with Ryan Duke, did you go with Mr. Ryan Duke anywhere?
I did.
And where was that?
To the orchard. He directed us to the orchard.
And when we're saying he, who is that that's directing you?
Ryan Duke, when we completed the interview at the Osceola Police Department, we asked him to take us to the orchard, which he did.
Show you a series of photographs. Being States Exhibits 38 through 41. Ask you to look at those, please.
Okay.
Are you familiar with what's shown in each of those photographs?
Yes, I am.
Generally, what do each of those photographs show?
These are depictions, photographs of when we took Ryan out to the location in the orchard, which was actually previously shown in Mr. Duke's photographs, just trying to see if he can identify whether or not that was the location where the body was burned.
Do each of those photographs truly and accurately depict the orchard, as well as when you took Ryan Alexander Duke to the orchard then on February the 22nd of 2017?
These photographs depict the pine tree grove. There's obviously the orchard is not pictured in this, but the general location, yes, sir.
Judge, at this time I would tender State's Exhibits 38 through 41.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, they're admitted.
Agent Chanel, showing you State's Exhibit. Number 38. You will tell me about this photograph, please, sir.
Sure, this is myself and Ryan Duke standing in front of me. You can see he's got a cigarette in his right hand and he's handcuffed. He was in custody at this time. We drove to that same, well, actually we drove down a little bit in my vehicle. He was riding in the vehicle with me and Agent Holland to this location. We actually drove down that little dirt lane closer to where this area is, which this area is the same general area that that we had Bo in the day before. And he's trying to identify the location of where the body was burned.
State's Exhibit number 39.
Once again, this is myself and Ryan Duke, and we're walking around and he's trying to make a determination of whether or not he remembers that being the area where the body was burned.
State's Exhibit number 40.
This is Ryan Duke. He's walking around in this same area, kind of making circles, just trying to he's peeking around bushes and trees and trying to see if he could recognize anything that stood out to him as the location where the body was burned.
State's Exhibit number 41.
Additionally, this is that same general location. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner of the photograph, you can see a gridded out area, which is, once again, this is the day after Bo had indicated. So we had a forensic anthropologist and some of our crime scene specialists, I believe, there. And they were gridding out the area and trying to make a search whether or not they could find any remains.
Now, was Mr. Ryan Alexander Duke able to give you a definite location of where he believed that the body was burned?
No.
With regard to the location where Mr. Bo Dukes had shown where her body was originally located, was Mr. Ryan Alexander Duke able to give you a location of where her body was originally located?
Yes, when we were driving out there, I think I asked him, I'm pretty certain I asked him, do you remember where the body was located when you brought her out here? And he pointed to the same, almost the same general location that Bo had pointed out just the day before, which was on that right-hand side in that first photograph as we're walking down that orchard side. He pointed out that area on the right-hand side and said that's where he put the body originally.
Now, with regard to the interview with Bo Dukes, I'm referring you back to your interview that would be Tuesday, February the 21st of 2017 with Mr. Dukes that we heard in the courtroom. Did Mr. Bo Dukes ever mention anything to you about a 411 call?
No. You can hear during the interview I actually was asking him about whether or not he had a cell phone or whether Ryan had a cell phone at the time.
Why was that information something you wanted to question Mr. Bo Dukes about?
It's guilty knowledge for us. We always suspected that, and once again, I wasn't the original case agent when this all happened. Other agents had worked this case years before I became the case agent. But I became aware after becoming that case agent from one of the agents who did some of the work on the phone records, his name is Bill Baudry, that there was a 411 telephone call made to Grinstead's house from a convenience store on that Sunday morning. And at the time, it was never made public. It's never been made public until recently, that we knew that there was a phone call made, and we always suspected there was some kind of connection, but we didn't know what it was at the time. But we always kept it in-house, and we never told anybody about it. So, particularly when we start talking to them, and he's admitting that, he helped, dispose of the body, and Ryan's the one that that murdered her, and, those are guilty things that we're trying to see if they're going to tell us without us actually telling them. We don't want to tell them about it before they say it, because then we're just telling them what to say. But if they say it openly before we ever question them about it or say anything about it, and they just volunteer the information, that guilty knowledge, the only people who are going to know it is the one who made the phone call or us, because we know about it.
And in fact, Mr. Bodukes did not mention anything about that phone call in your interview with him, is that right?
He did not.
Now, with regard to State's Exhibit Exhibit 42, ask you to look at that.
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with the person shown in that photograph?
Yes, sir, I am.
And who is in that photograph?
Sure. State's Exhibit number 42 is a photograph of Bo Dukes.
Is it a true and accurate depiction of Mr. Bodukes as he looked back in 2017?
Yes, sir.
Judge, I would tender State's Exhibit number 42.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right, it's a minute.
I have nothing further. Agent Still.
Mr. Fox, you may cross examine.
Thank you. Good morning, Agent Still.
Morning, John.
You became the case agent for the Grinstead case in 2009?
Yes,
Okay. At that time, you replaced Special Agent Leah Leitner?
I did.
Okay. When you are assigned to, well, let me ask you this, prior to becoming the case agent in the Grinstead case, had you worked on the case at all?
I did a couple things. When I was a deputy in Thomasville, there was somebody that I helped, one of the agents. His name is Sean Edgar. I helped him do an interview in reference to that case when I was a deputy sheriff. That's the first time I'd ever heard about that case. And then when I got to the office in Perry, there was a few interviews that I had done prior to becoming the case agent, or going with Agent Leitner and SAC Rothwell to go do an interview or collect a sample of DNA from somebody.
Okay. So you had some contact with the case prior to becoming
A little
the lead
bit,
case
yes.
agent?
Very little, but yes.
Okay. Once you became the lead case agent, did you review the prior work and file that had been developed by the previous special agents who worked on it?
Some, yes, not all.
And it was a voluminous file at that point
Yes.
in time?
Once again, at that point, I'm working all the cases that we have at this particular time. Not that Tara's case was ever a cold case, but it was an older case, and so you can only do so much at a time, because you have a lot of other new cases coming in, so it was a little bit of both.
You have to prioritize your assets?
Yes, sir. And I'm not putting light that this wasn't important. It was very important, but you're doing a little bit of work at a time to try to catch up to, 4 years of work prior to you becoming involved.
Absolutely. Saying you don't have time to go back and double check everything the prior case agents had done and determine if there's something they hadn't followed up on, whether you need to follow up.
You try to. I can't say that that's always the case, but you try to do it the best you can, yes.
Sure. I know you interviewed Dixie Hudson on March 13, 2017.
Yes, sir.
And Jake Dukes on May 24th, 2017, correct?
Yes, sir. I think so. That's right, Dave.
Prior to those interviews, had you or anyone at the GBI spoken with either Dixie Hudson or Jake Dukes?
Not that I can recall, no.
Thank you. And prior, in preparing for this trial, you've reviewed the case file, your summaries?
My summaries, yes, I've reviewed them.
Did you review the prior summaries generated by Agent Leitner and the previous case agent?
Pertaining to this?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. Does the GBI use civilian contractors or other non-GBI employees to assist in these investigations or to review documents, run down non-sensitive information?
I mean, we do get requested, and we will on occasion have the locals, and just an example, sometimes we will en route to a crime scene or something, because it usually takes us a little bit longer to get there. So when we get there, we want to hit the ground running. So like a search warrant, like the locals could help us write the search warrant prior to us getting there as an example of that. But yes, we will cooperate with other agencies the best we can.
Okay. Well, what about civilian contractors, though, not local law enforcement agencies?
Right, local law enforcement, yes. I'm not aware of any civilian, if you'll describe what you mean by civilian contractors.
Well, for example, I believe that one of the individuals who had worked on the case as a doctor from Kennesaw. She's not an employee of the GBI.
Correct.
She would be a civilian contractor.
Okay, yes, we would.
Okay, so there are times that civilian contractors are used in these cases?
Yes. Well, at least in this case, I don't know that I've used them that much in any other cases. Maybe we have, but I can't say for sure.
Well, and for the GBI, this case is unique, given just the sheer amount of volume that, and information, evidence, things that have been developed since 2005.
Yes, sir.
Now, June 2016, John McCullough called into the GBI.
He did.
All right. Logan Holland passed that message to you the
Correct.
same day.
Yes,
All right. And you called him back. I believe you said the same day.
I did.
All right. Now, that call was not recorded.
No.
Okay. Now, when you spoke with him later in 2018, you
Yes.
called him on the phone and were able to record that conversation.
Yes.
Put it on speakerphone. On that day, when you called Mr. McCullough, June 14, 2016, why didn't you just put the call on a speakerphone and then record that conversation?
I could have, but like I said, I got back to the office. I called on the landline. It wasn't on my cell phone, so I just called the landline. We had gotten information like this before. This isn't the first time that, we've called somebody who's called them back, hey, what information do you have? Whether or not it's pertinent or not. We didn't know what information he would have had at the time. So it's just a general phone call. What information do you have? We don't know if it's true or factual. We're going to go and follow up on that. And then if a follow-up is needed, we'll do the follow-up, which is what we did. It was determined that we needed a follow-up recorded interview because the information he had given seemed to be credible at that point. So we needed to follow up with a recorded interview.
And given that it wasn't recorded, you took written notes as you were speaking with Mr. McCullough?
I did.
Okay. And I believe we heard from GBI yesterday that those notes are then reduced to an investigative summary.
Yes.
Okay. How long from the time the notes are taken until they are reduced to a written summary?
In this particular case, I actually dictated this on the same day that I did the interview.
Okay.
So I did the interview, and then according to this, our investigative summaries are date stamped. So I generated the investigative summary, on the 16th. 16th is when I generated the investigative summary, so 2 days after.
All right. You take detailed notes?
I take pretty good notes.
All right.
You can see from the video when we were interviewing with Bo, I took probably 10 pages at least.
Absolutely. What happens to your notes after you dictate your investigative summary?
They're shredded.
So you would agree that it is essential when creating these investigative summaries that you include as much information,
Yes,
all
there's
the
much pertinent information.
contained in your notes.
Yes, it's, once again, it's a summary of, what we talk about, but if there are, very important points or key points, you obviously want to document those.
Because you would be looking for things that could corroborate the information being given to you, or on
Correct.
the other hand, suggest that it may not be true.
Correct.
Now, you're familiar with the statement Mr. McCullough gave you in the summary you created on June 14, 2016.
Yes,
All right. And he told you he was in basic at Fort Sill with Mr. Dukes.
yes,
And if you need to refresh your recollection at all, I believe you have up there with you your investigative summary, but this one is Exhibit 1902.
I'm looking at it.
All right, very good. Told you that during their exodus from basic, that Christmas holiday, that he traveled to Ocilla and met
Yes.
Mr. Dukes, that he spent time with Mr. Dukes' family, that he drove around in Mr. Dukes' mother's car, that he borrowed a white F-150 long bed. And he told you that while they were riding around in Ocilla, Dukes said to him, "You're my battle buddy," right?
Yep.
He also told you it takes 2,000 degrees to burn a body, but pecan wood burns really hot.
Yes,
And he told you that those statements were made only after Mr. McCullough and Mr. Dukes saw a missing persons poster for Miss Grinstead.
right. He indicated while they were driving around, that he saw the poster of Miss Grinstead. Once again, I wasn't in Ocilla at the time, but I've been told that there were, numerous, missing persons posters, so forth, billboards around, yes.
And there's no reason to doubt that based on everything you know about the case.
Right.
There was a lot of interest in finding her. Mr. McCullough then tells you, Mr. Dukes told him, Dukes had been contacted by Tara Grinstead's boyfriend to
Correct.
help him. Those were Mr. McCullough's words, not
Absolutely.
just your interpretation. You were just
Yes.
writing down what he told you.
Right. He's telling me that, and once again, you look at the time I'm generating this, we hadn't done a second interview. We hadn't even interviewed Bo. Well, I'd interviewed Bo earlier, but, yeah, we didn't know that. I mean, we're just basing it off of what he's saying.
Right. You're just, in your report, you're putting down accurately what McCullough tells you.
Correct.
All right. So he tells you he had been, that is, Bo had been contacted by Grinstead's boyfriend to help him.
Right.
Dukes did not say the boyfriend's name.
Correct.
Dukes drove the F-150 and met the boyfriend where Grinstead's, drove the F-150 and then met Grinstead's boyfriend. The boyfriend and Dukes then loaded the body into the truck. They then drove it to a pecan orchard and burned it.
Yep. To nothing.
And McCullough relayed that Dukes said the boyfriend had gotten upset and jealous with Grinstead, which provoked an argument leading to a physical altercation where she was beaten and strangled.
That's what he said.
All right. Mr. McCullough then stated to you he had waited this long to follow up with the GBI because he thought Dukes may have just been intoxicated.
Correct. He acted, once again, over the time Bo had told other people, and I think the same thing that he had relayed. Of course, I found this out afterwards, but that he just didn't believe what he was saying at the time was true.
Sure. And you've heard that. We heard during Mr. Dukes' interview with you, when he sat down and talked with you, gave you a lot of names, and that's what most of the people had told you, is that they just didn't believe what had been said because they thought he'd been intoxicated.
And I'm not the one that interviewed him. I've talked with agents that did, but yes, that's mostly what they said, yes.
That's what's relayed in the investigative reports and summaries you reviewed.
Correct. Myself or other agents that did the interviews.
Thank you. And then McCullough told you that he did not have any other further information or details to provide you.
Correct.
And I'm assuming that you asked him, especially hearing somebody say the boyfriend had contacted Mr. Dukes.
Right.
That had been your theory that had been investigated and looked at as whether a boyfriend may have been involved in this case.
Correct. Or former boyfriend, yes.
Okay. And that
Once again, it's pertinent information. That's why it's in the summary. That, to me, at the time, that's very important information
Right.
that he's relaying.
I mean, that stands out to you that McCullough is saying boyfriend.
Yes.
Okay. But unlike the instances of guilty knowledge you had described earlier, the telephone call, things of that nature, the media, the public knew that the boyfriend had been looked at in
Correct.
this case. That was not a secret in 2016.
Right. Once again, that's why we'll generate the summary. Some of this information, not particularly with Mr. Dukes, but, you've heard over the time, of course, that you'll hear people, repeat rumors. And so we have to follow them out and we have to vet it out no matter what.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. Now, during that interview, Mr. McCullough did not tell you that Mr. Dukes had made any statements to him about this matter while they were in basic training before Exodus.
No, he said that it was during the Exodus, then they were driving around, and because he wouldn't have known about, and that's another thing, he wouldn't have known about Miss Grinstead at the time until they got driving around, and that goes back to what he says, I saw the posters, they got to talking about the posters, wow, I think there was a large reward, and that's when they started the conversation, and then he said at some point during that, they were drinking, intoxicated, driving around, and he tells them about the 2,000 degrees to burn the body, and so on and so forth.
And that is based on the original conversation you had with Mr. McCullough. That's the
Correct.
story he relayed. It
Exactly.
all happened while on Exodus, while they're driving in the car after seeing the poster.
Yes.
Okay. During the original interview with Mr. McCullough, he did not tell you that he had previously called law enforcement in Fitzgerald, Georgia, to report
No,
this.
he did not. He did in the subsequent interview, but he didn't in that interview.
Okay. And that was even after you had asked him, do you have any further information, anything
Correct.
else bearing on it?
Correct. Because once again, that information is in my second summary, which is readily available, and obviously that's pertinent information.
But he didn't tell you that the first time?
No,
He didn't tell you that he had called other local law enforcement offices throughout the years and had never gotten a response?
no,
He didn't tell you that he had sent a Facebook message to one of the groups trying to locate Miss Grinstead or get information on her?
no, sir. Once again, the only thing he ever said about local law enforcement, I think, was 2008 or 2009. He said he contacted local law enforcement. I think I asked him, what law enforcement did you call? And I think he indicated maybe Osceola and the sheriff's office there. And I wrote it in my investigative summary. That was, obviously pertinent.
And that was the 2018 summary, though?
Correct,
Not the 2016 summary?
correct.
Okay. In the 2016 conversation you had with Mr. McCullough, did he ever tell you that he had called the GBI multiple times with no response?
No,
Okay. And in fact, when he called the GBI in 2016, that same day, the agent who gets the message passes it to you, and you're calling him back.
correct.
And that's because you were taking leads seriously at that point in time.
Well, I take every lead seriously, but
Absolutely.
I mean, if somebody's calling that's going to give information about a case, we obviously want to reach out as quickly as possible, because if they're calling, then they want to be heard, so you got to give them the opportunity to be heard.
The GBI just wouldn't ignore that call coming in.
I would hope not.
Have you ever seen anything in your investigative summaries, notes, anything to do with this case to suggest that Mr. McCullough had ever contacted the GBI prior to June 2016?
I have not seen anything.
Thanks. Now, in the years following that, you've developed a lot of information about this case.
The years following,
Well, since 2016.
Okay.
2016 through now.
yes, sir.
Okay. You've spoken with a number of people who Bo relayed to you that he had told about this.
Correct, or other agents have, yes, sir.
Other agents have. Mr. McCullough is the only person who has ever stated that Bo told them that it was a boyfriend who had called him originally.
That I remember, yes.
Thanks. And based on your investigation and the facts you've developed, it was Ryan Duke who took Bo's truck without his knowledge to pick up Miss Grinstead's body from her home and take it out to the edge of the pecan orchard that you had pointed out.
You're asking me to relay what he said during my interview?
Now, I'm just
or-
asking if that's your understanding.
Yes,
Thank you. It wasn't that Bo had gone to her house to assist someone picking up her body.
no,
Now, when the GBI would get a tip concerning the Grinstead case and would have specific names, would the GBI run that name through the existing case file, any database associated with that file, to determine whether that name had come up in the investigation before?
I did it in this case.
You did it in this case?
Right, when John called, I typed in Bo's name into the way the GymNet system works is that you have a name and you type it in, but it only searches for, and I didn't find this out till later, but if we haven't generated what we call identification data at the time, which is, the identifier's name, date of birth, social security number, and enter that into the system, our system won't just pull that up. Like, it won't do like a word search the entire case file or case files. It only does it if we have ID data. So I remember actually typing Bo's name into the database of the search, and it didn't pop up with anything.
And is that because in 2008, when Agent Leitner spoke with Janice Paulk and Andy Paulk, and they relayed information concerning Ryan Duke and Bo Dukes, their names were not entered into the identifier database?
Correct.
Had their names been entered in that database, you would have found that out in 2016.
Yes.
Thank you. You met with Mr. Dukes June 16, 2016.
Yes.
Okay, that was here in Rochelle, and that's just because it was the most convenient location to meet with him.
For him, it was. He seemed like, once again, he was in between or having to go to work. I think he said he had to be at work at like 8 o'clock or something like that, so I scheduled it for just after 7 so he could make it to work.
And you accommodated him by meeting him pretty early in the morning down here.
I did,
Came down voluntarily,
yes,
and you recorded that conversation.
I did,
That is the conversation that we heard yesterday afternoon.
it was.
And that's the entire conversation. There was nothing asked or answered before or after that recording started.
Correct, other than, I may have said, hey, thanks for coming down prior to the interview, but nothing more than that. And then
Outside of-
thanking him afterwards, thank you for coming down, I'll be in touch if I need to be.
Other than greetings and pleasantries,
Correct.
nothing asked, nothing answered.
Correct,
Thank you. And he gave you a DNA sample.
he did,
And since that sample has been received, you have not had a confirmed match for his DNA in this case.
no,
Thank you. Now, the next time you met with Mr. Dukes was February 19, 2017.
yes, sir,
Okay. And that was a meeting at the GBI office,
correct,
one which you had facilitated
I did,
between Mr. Dukes and his counsel and the district attorneys for the appropriate counties.
Yes,
so
sir.
that they could meet.
yes,
It's your understanding that Mr. Dukes was interested in speaking with you.
yes,
After introducing the parties, you walked out of the room.
correct,
That conversation was not recorded to your knowledge.
correct,
You don't know what was said one way or another.
correct.
You've never asked anyone since then what was said in that room.
I've talked with the DAs, I've asked if, I think later on, and they've been very not wanting to talk about it. Obviously this is now. They did talk about it, they did have conversations with you and with Bo. There was, and I asked specifically, is there any deal? Was there any deal at the time? This is, once again, this is recent, and I was told there was no deal given.
Now, you weren't in the room to know exactly what was said.
Absolutely not.
Okay, but it's your understanding there was no specific agreement to plead any specific charges? or
Correct.
for immunity or anything like that?
Correct.
Okay. You came back in the room 30 minutes later.
Yes, sir, approximately.
At that point in time, the district attorneys left, and Mr. Dukes gave you a name,
He did.
gave you a location,
He did.
and gave you an outline of his understanding of what happened in his involvement.
He just, it was brief. He just said, there was photograph, I showed him a picture of the orchard. He said, that's the right orchard, that's the right location. He said that the body was burned by he and Ryan out there, and that Ryan had killed her.
Okay. And you set up a meeting for the 21st,
Correct.
all right, and he left, was not under arrest.
Correct.
He came back and met with you on the 21st.
He did.
All right. And he gave you details,
Many.
many details. You questioned him again about Mr. McCullough's statements.
I did.
in that. And when you asked him about McCullough, Mr. Dukes told you, I don't remember the conversation I had with him, but he did tell you, looking back on everything, I would imagine it took place. You recall that?
Yes.
Okay. And then he also again told you, I don't remember the conversation. We were probably drinking a lot that night.
Right, he's referring to the conversation from 2006 with McCullough.
All right.
So on and so forth.
And Mr. Dukes then gave you a list of people he had told.
Yes,
It was at least 7 names.
yes,
And these were people who were friends, they were family, they were members of the community. And he didn't hold that information back from you.
no,
He gave you their phone numbers,
he did,
knew that they would be contacted.
yes. He was
And-
very cooperative about that,
Yes.
as anybody can see.
At that point, he was holding nothing back from you.
Appeared to be, yes.
Yes. And were you ever able to determine whether any of those people he named had ever come forward to law enforcement to report what he had told them?
No,
Not a single one of them?
Once again, I didn't interview all of them, but I don't recall that any of them came forward with that information. There was another person that wasn't named that had come forward back then, but not any of the names that he mentioned back then, no.
And of course, that's something you would look at because that is corroboration.
Correct. That's why we're getting the information when I talked to him, who else was with you when it was said, who else was there. That's the idea, is to corroborate independently just beyond what he's telling us that that's what happened or took place.
Absolutely. He also told you during that interview that he had had no contact with Ryan Duke since 2007, except for a time that Duke had sent a Facebook message to he and another friend, and that was March 8 of 2016.
Correct.
And thereafter, there was a message sent from Duke to Mr. Dukes, February 16, 2017, another Facebook message. Okay. If you tried to independently verify that was accurate,
Yes, he actually, about the messages,
well, that there have been no contact or additional messages between Duke and Dukes through any of the subpoenas that you had served to.
right, we executed a search warrant on his cell phone records. I do not recall seeing any telephone numbers between he and Ryan over the cell phone, no.
So that was an accurate statement.
Appeared to be, yes.
And he agreed during that meeting to cooperate with you in order to bring Ryan Duke to justice.
He did?
He agreed to try to contact you by phone, by message, if that would have assisted the GBI.
Yes.
Even though it never occurred, he even agreed to wear a wire, if you will, in order to try to record conversations.
Yes, he expressed fear about doing it with, worrying about Ryan's response to it. But yes, he did.
But that fear notwithstanding, he agreed, and he didn't hesitate to help the GBI bring Mr. Duke to justice.
At that point, yeah.
Okay. He also agreed and was cooperative in trying to get the forensic team to the correct location so that Ms. Grinstead's remains could be located.
Talking about taking us out there to,
Yeah.
yes, he tried, yes.
Okay. And I believe there was some difficulty in locating the exact site.
Correct. For him that day there was. Now, there was some follow-up, but I wasn't the agent that handled that follow-up.
That's right. And you don't believe that difficulty was intentional or that he was trying to mislead you and put you in the wrong place?
No, not based on what he was trying to do and then subsequently did the following day.
Correct. And that's because these wooded locations, these orchards, these trees, they grow, the landscape changes. What something looked like in 2005 is not what it would look like 10 plus years later.
Potentially, yes, sir. Well, obviously, over time, trees, bushes, they grow. And I think if you recall during the interview with him, I did ask him multiple times, is this, I know things may look different, were these trees still here, or so on and so forth. So I was trying to determine that, whether or not he could really recognize that area.
And he was ultimately able to get you to the location, or get the GBI, I should say, to the location where the remains were found.
He and his uncle, Randy Hudson.
Okay, very good. You were able to obtain the search warrant for Ryan Duke's DNA based on what Mr. Dukes had told you?
The day before, yes. And what Brooke had said, obviously, and there was another, I laid out all of the facts of the case, how it became about, and then added in those, yes.
Now, you spoke with Mr. McCullough January 26, 2018.
Correct.
All right. This was 1 year, 7 months, 12 days after your first interview with him.
Mm-hmm.
You had not spoken with him between 2016 and 2018.
No,
No one at the GBI had spoken with him since 2016 to 2018.
no, not that I'm aware of, no. It wasn't me.
Okay.
If somebody else did, there's no investigative summary documenting any further contact.
All right. So there's nothing in the file to suggest that someone did.
Correct.
And if they did, it wasn't documented in any way, shape, or form.
I would assume another agent would have maybe told me if they had, but
And that's because you're the lead case agent. You need to know what's going on.
correct.
All right. Between 2016 and 2018, Mr. McCullough didn't call back into the GBI to talk with you all and follow up where things were, did he?
No. I think he called the DA's office. I do believe he called the DA's office, but I think that's it. Yes, sir. Never our office.
When was that called to the DA's office?
I'm not sure. I think one of the assistant attorneys, maybe Ms. Hart, had called or talked to me. We were talking, meeting with the case, and she mentioned, conducting a follow-up with Mr. McCullough.
Is that what triggered the interview on June 26, 2018?
Right. It's just a reminder, hey, it's probably a good idea, and I agree. Yeah, that's a good idea. We need to go back and record that interview with him.
Okay. And since your initial interview in 2016, there had been some developments. Ryan Duke had been arrested and charged with murder.
Yes.
Bo Dukes had been arrested and charged with hindering and concealment in the destruction of evidence tied to the burning of Ms. Grinstead's body.
Correct.
And many of the facts about that case had then been disclosed on national news and throughout media outlets.
Yes.
Now, during the interview on 2018, Mr. McCullough describes that F-150 as a single cab, long bed, manual transmission.
Mm-hmm.
And during that interview, he says that a number of times. It stuck out in his mind because, as he told you, driving around in the thing. In fact, I took off for a couple of days in it.
Yes.
All right. You were able to run down photographs, information about Mr. Duke's truck.
I did.
In fact, you found the truck itself and were able to develop a number of photographs of it.
Mr. Dukes described in his interview that the truck he had was totaled when he was in Savannah or in that base, Fort Stewart, somewhere area. So what I did was contact through the insurance commission. I contacted them and found the insurance company that handled the claims on the vehicle and figured that they might have some photographs of the truck. Obviously, if that's the truck that was used, we try to get as much as we could, find it, maybe even try to process it if we could. So I got the photographs of the truck through the National Insurance Commission Board, and through I think it was AUSA was the insurance company that had those photographs.
And it was a white F-150.
It was.
Was it long bed or short bed?
I don't remember.
Would it be helpful to see a photograph to
Sure.
refresh your recollection?
Sure. I mean, I can look at my case file too, but if you haven't, not in this one, but the other one I do.
Mr. Fox, this may be a good time to recess for lunch while you're looking for that.
Okay.
Members of the jury, I'm on recess for lunch. It's noon. Be back in the jury room by 1:30 with these instructions, and that is